Hello everyone, my name is Margaret and I'm 65 years old. 2 weeks ago, I buried my sweet husband Henry after 38 years of marriage. He passed from a heart attack at age 67. Last Saturday, I attended my nephew Tommy's first birthday party at my sister Linda's house. That's when Linda stood up and shocked everyone. She announced that Tommy was actually Henry's son, waving around what she claimed was his last will. She demanded half of our $800,000 home as Tommy's inheritance. I nearly choked on my cake trying not to laugh out loud. You see, there was something Linda didn't know about Henry. I'll tell you everything. First, let me thank you for watching Granny's Voice. Please subscribe and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. We might give you a shout out in our next video. Today's special shout out goes to Karen James from Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you for being part of our family. Now, let me tell you everything. Henry and I first met 40 years ago at our local church bake sale. I was selling my famous apple pies when he approached my table. He bought 3 whole pies, claiming they were for his mother, but later confessed he just wanted an excuse to talk to me. "These smell like heaven," he said with the sweetest smile. "Just like the baker." That was Henry, charming and kind to everyone he met. Our first date was the very next evening at Miller's Diner downtown. We talked until the restaurant closed, sharing stories about our families and dreams. Henry worked as a school principal, dedicated to helping children learn and grow. He remembered every student's name and always asked about their families. 2 years later, he proposed during our church's Christmas service, right there in front of everyone. The whole congregation started clapping and cheering. We married the following spring in that same little church, surrounded by friends and family who had watched our love story bloom. We bought our first home together after our second anniversary. It was a cozy 2-story house on Maple Street for $200,000, which felt like a fortune back then. Henry had just been promoted to superintendent, and I was teaching 3rd grade at the elementary school. The house had a big backyard with an old oak tree perfect for a tire swing. We spent weekends painting rooms and planting flowers, dreaming of the children who would someday play in that yard under the oak tree's shade. But those children never came, no matter how much we hoped and prayed. For 10 long years, we visited doctors and tried everything they suggested. We saved money for special treatments and followed every piece of advice. I still remember our last doctor's visit, sitting in that cold waiting room holding Henry's hand. The doctor told us that having children might not be possible for us. The drive home was silent, both of us lost in our own thoughts and broken dreams. That evening, Henry took my hands and said, "Margaret, we have each other, and that's more than many people ever get. Our love is enough to fill any house." He meant every word. We slowly learned to find joy in different ways. We traveled to places we'd only seen in magazines. We became the favorite aunt and uncle to all our nieces and nephews. Henry poured his heart into his students, treating each one like his own child. Our home became the gathering place for holidays and celebrations. My younger sister Linda was always the dramatic one in our family. 3 years younger than me at 62, she had always lived life like she was on stage. While I was teaching and Henry was working with schools, Linda jumped from job to job and man to man. Our parents worried about her constantly, always sending her money when she got into trouble. Linda and I had a strange relationship growing up. She was beautiful and outgoing, the kind of person everyone noticed when she walked into a room. But she always seemed jealous of what I had. If I got a new dress, Linda needed a better one. When Henry and I bought our house, Linda complained for months about her tiny apartment until our parents helped her move somewhere nicer. When I got promoted at school, Linda suddenly decided she wanted to be a teacher too, though she never followed through. It was tiring, but Henry always encouraged me to be patient with her. "She's your only sister," he would remind me. "Family forgives family." 5 years ago, Linda started dating Jake, a mechanic she met at a bar. Jake was good-looking in a rough way, with oil-stained hands and a pickup truck our parents didn't approve of. Their relationship was like a soap opera, with big fights followed by passionate makeups. Then came the surprise pregnancy announcement at Easter dinner 3 years ago. Linda had never wanted children, often saying kids would ruin her figure and her freedom. Yet there she was, dramatically announcing she was going to be a mother while fake crying into her napkin. I felt a familiar pang of sadness mixed with happiness. After all our struggles and heartbreak, Linda had accidentally gotten what Henry and I had desperately wanted for years. But I pushed those bitter feelings away and focused on being excited for her. I was determined to be the best aunt possible to this little one. Tommy was born healthy at 7 pounds even. I was right there at the hospital with flowers and a handmade baby blanket I'd spent months crocheting. Linda seemed overwhelmed by being a mom from day one, calling me almost daily in tears about feeding problems or sleepless nights. I helped as much as I could, often babysitting Tommy overnight so Linda could rest. I loved spending time with that sweet baby, rocking him to sleep and singing lullabies. Henry was more distant with Tommy than I expected. Looking back now, I thought it was because being around a baby reminded him of our own lost dreams. He was always polite when Linda brought Tommy over for visits, but he kept his distance. I never questioned it at the time, thinking he just needed space to heal from our own disappointments. Then came that horrible Monday morning 3 weeks ago. Henry woke up complaining of chest pains and shortness of breath. I begged him to let me drive him to the hospital, but he insisted it was just indigestion from the spicy dinner we'd had the night before. "I'll be fine, honey," he said, kissing my forehead. "Just need some fresh air." Those were the last words he spoke to me. A neighbor found him collapsed in our garden an hour later. By the time the ambulance arrived, he was already gone. The doctors said it was a massive heart attack. At 67, my Henry was gone. The days that followed were a blur of funeral arrangements and visitors. Linda was strangely absent during most of the planning, claiming Tommy had a fever or she couldn't find anyone to watch him. When she did show up to the funeral service, she stayed in the back and left before the family dinner at our house. I was too overwhelmed with grief to think much about her behavior at the time. I just assumed she was struggling with her own sadness about losing Henry, who had been like a big brother to her for so many years. A week after we buried Henry, Tommy's first birthday arrived. The last thing I wanted to do was pretend to be happy at a children's party, but family duty called to me. "Henry would want you to go," my neighbor Mrs. Peterson reminded me during one of her daily visits with casseroles. He always said family comes first, even when it's hard. So I found myself driving to Linda's rented duplex across town with a wrapped gift in my passenger seat and exhaustion weighing down my shoulders. I hadn't slept properly since Henry died, spending long nights staring at his empty pillow and listening for footsteps that would never come again. I parked behind several cars I didn't recognize and took deep breaths before grabbing Tommy's gift and walking to the front door. No one should have to fake happiness just 2 weeks after burying their husband, I thought. But I put on a brave smile and rang the doorbell. Linda's friend Carol answered, her face showing surprise when she saw me. "Oh, Margaret, you actually came," she said nervously, glancing over her shoulder. "Everyone's in the backyard." The small house was decorated with colorful balloons and streamers everywhere. A big banner reading, "Happy First Birthday, Tommy," was stretched across the living room. I noticed a group of people I'd never seen before gathered in the kitchen, whispering quietly among themselves. They stopped talking completely when I walked by, their eyes following me like I was some kind of celebrity. In the backyard, more strangers stood around holding plastic cups and paper plates. I spotted my parents sitting awkwardly at a folding table, looking very uncomfortable and out of place. My father stood up when he saw me, relief washing across his weathered face. "Margaret," he said, hugging me tightly. "We weren't sure you'd make it today." "Of course I came," I replied, placing Tommy's gift on the present table. "Where's the birthday boy?" "With Linda inside," my mother said, not meeting my eyes directly. "They should be out any minute for the cake-cutting ceremony." I walked around awkwardly, accepting sympathy about Henry's death and dodging questions about how I was coping. Everyone seemed nervous, conversations stopping suddenly when I got close enough to hear. I figured people just didn't know how to act around someone who'd recently become a widow. After about 30 minutes of uncomfortable small talk, Linda finally emerged from the house carrying Tommy on her hip. She was wearing a brand new dress I'd never seen before, and her hair looked like she'd just come from an expensive salon. Tommy looked adorable in a tiny suit and bow tie, his chubby arms reaching for all the attention. Linda barely looked at me as she placed Tommy in his decorated high chair for photos. She seemed unusually confident, almost excited, moving around the yard like she owned the world. She picked up a plastic spoon and tapped it against her drink cup, calling for everyone's attention. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate Tommy's special first birthday," she began, her voice carrying across the entire backyard. "This past year has brought so many changes and surprises to our family." The guests exchanged worried glances. My mother suddenly became very interested in studying her shoes. Something felt very wrong in the air. "I've been keeping a big secret," Linda continued dramatically, placing her hand on Tommy's head like she was blessing him. "One that I can't hide anymore, especially after what happened to Henry." A cold chill ran down my spine despite the warm afternoon sun. Something terrible was about to happen. "Tommy isn't Jake's son," she announced loudly, her eyes finding mine across the crowded yard. "He belongs to Henry. Margaret's husband and I had a secret relationship 2 years ago." The world seemed to stop spinning around me. I heard gasps and whispers from the other guests, felt my father go rigid beside me, but everything sounded like it was underwater. "Henry and I fell in love during a difficult time in his marriage," Linda continued with practiced confidence. "We never meant for it to happen, but Tommy is the result of our love affair." I stood there frozen, unable to process the lies coming out of my sister's mouth. She was claiming she had slept with my Henry, that little Tommy was his child instead of Jake's. It was so ridiculous that I almost started laughing right there. But Linda wasn't finished destroying my husband's memory. She reached into her purse and pulled out what looked like an official document. Henry knew the truth about Tommy being his son. Right before he died, he changed his will to provide for his child. She waved the paper in the air like a victory flag. "This legal document states that half of the house Henry shared with Margaret should go to Tommy as his biological father's heir." Every single person at that party turned to stare at me, waiting for my reaction. I could see the pity, the curiosity, and the discomfort on their faces. My parents looked absolutely horrified. My father was half standing like he might need to catch me if I fainted. And then, to everyone's complete surprise, including my own, I felt a smile trying to form on my lips. Not a happy smile, but the kind that comes when something is so completely absurd that it becomes funny. I pressed my lips together, trying to contain the inappropriate laughter bubbling up inside my chest like champagne. "Oh, I see," I said finally, my voice surprisingly calm and steady. I took a sip of lemonade to buy myself time and pushed down the urge to laugh in Linda's lying face. "May I take a look at this will, Linda?" Her confident expression wavered just slightly. She clearly hadn't expected such a calm reaction from me. Slowly, she walked over and handed me the document, a single typed page with what appeared to be Henry's signature at the bottom. I looked it over quickly, noticing obvious mistakes immediately. The language was completely wrong, nothing like the legal papers Henry brought home from his lawyer's office over the years. And the signature, while it looked similar to Henry's at first glance, was clearly fake. The way he always made his H was completely different, and the curve of his Y was wrong. I carefully folded the paper and handed it back to her with a polite smile. "Thank you for showing me this, Linda. I think I need to head home now." "That's it?" Linda asked, confusion clear in her voice. "You're not going to say anything else about this?" "Not right now," I replied calmly, picking up my purse from the table. "This is Tommy's special day. We can discuss this privately later if needed." I said goodbye to my shocked parents, promising to call them soon to explain everything. As I walked to my car, I could hear the worried whispers starting behind me. The happy party atmosphere was completely ruined now. Once I was safely inside my car and out of everyone's sight, I finally let out the laugh that had been threatening to escape all afternoon. It started small and quiet, then grew bigger until tears were streaming down my cheeks. Not tears of joy or sadness, but a strange mixture of grief, anger, and complete disbelief at my sister's terrible lies. Because there was something very important that Linda didn't know about Henry and me. Something we had never told anyone in our family. Something that made her elaborate lie not just hurtful and wrong, but completely impossible. The real truth about Henry began 4 years ago, long before Tommy was even born. Henry had been having health problems for months, something he tried to hide from me at first. He was too proud to admit when he wasn't feeling well. Finally, I convinced him to see Dr. Roberts, our family doctor for over 20 years. After several tests and appointments, Dr. Roberts referred Henry to a specialist in the city. The diagnosis was prostate cancer, caught early but requiring immediate treatment. The surgery was scheduled for the following month, and we were both scared but hopeful. The operation went better than expected, Dr. Martinez told us afterwards. Henry's recovery was smooth and the cancer was completely removed. But there was a side effect we hadn't fully considered beforehand. The type of surgery Henry needed would make it impossible for him to father children ever again. It was a medical fact, clearly documented in all his medical records. The surgery happened 3 years before Tommy was conceived, making it absolutely impossible for Henry to be anyone's father after that point. We kept Henry's cancer diagnosis private, just between us and our doctors. After decades of people asking nosy questions about why we never had children, we had learned to keep our medical business to ourselves. Only Henry, myself, and his medical team knew about the surgery and its effects. Even my parents didn't know their son-in-law had battled cancer and won. Henry was embarrassed about the whole situation and preferred to keep it quiet, which I completely understood and respected. After Henry's surgery, as he was recovering at home, he made a comment that seemed paranoid at the time but now made perfect sense. "Linda's been acting strange lately," he said one afternoon while resting in his favorite chair. "She keeps asking personal questions about our marriage and finances. I have a feeling she might try something crazy one day." I had laughed it off, thinking he was just worried because of his illness. But Henry was more serious than I realized. The next week, he asked me to drive him to see his lawyer. Mr. Thompson had handled Henry's legal affairs for 15 years, including our house purchase and various financial matters. I sat with Henry as he explained Linda's increasingly odd behavior and his recent medical situation. Mr. Thompson listened carefully, taking notes about everything Henry told him. "I recommend we document all of this," Mr. Thompson advised. "Medical records, any strange conversations with Linda, even emails or text messages. You never know what might become important later." We followed his advice completely, creating a detailed file of everything related to the situation. Henry also updated his real will through proper legal channels, making sure I would inherit everything if something happened to him. Mr. Thompson kept official copies of all the documents, and we placed our copies in a safety deposit box at First National Bank, just to be extra careful. "Hopefully we'll never need any of this," Henry said as we locked the box. "But I want you protected if Linda ever tries anything foolish." The morning after Tommy's birthday party disaster, I drove straight to the bank as soon as it opened. Mrs. Williams, the bank manager who had known Henry and me for decades, expressed her condolences as she escorted me to the safety deposit box area. I sat alone in the small private room and opened the metal box Henry and I had filled with what he called our insurance policy. Inside was everything I needed to prove Linda's lies were completely false. Henry's real will, properly signed and witnessed, leaving everything to me. Medical records clearly showing his surgery and its effects, making fatherhood impossible after that date. A detailed journal Henry had kept, documenting every strange conversation and interaction with Linda over the past few years. Printed copies of text messages Linda had sent to Henry, asking inappropriate questions about our marriage and money. A letter from Mr. Thompson confirming he had witnessed Henry's legitimate will and could verify its authenticity in court if necessary. And at the bottom of the box, a sealed envelope with my name written in Henry's careful handwriting. With shaking hands, I opened the letter and read Henry's final words to me. My dearest Margaret, if you're reading this, something has happened to me and you've needed these documents. I pray it's many years from now and Linda has grown out of her selfish ways. But if not, if she's tried to hurt you when I'm not there to protect you, use everything in this box to defend yourself. I know how much you love family, how you always see the good in people. But you deserve protection from those who would take advantage of your kind heart. I love you more than words can express, more than time can measure. Whatever happens, remember that always, Henry. Tears poured down my face as I read his words, feeling his love and protection reaching across from heaven to help me. My wonderful, thoughtful husband had seen this coming somehow. Maybe not the exact details, but he knew Linda might try to use his death for her own gain. I carefully returned most items to the box, keeping only what I needed as evidence. Then I called Mr. Thompson's office and made an appointment for that same afternoon. Thompson and Associates occupied the third floor of an old brick building downtown, the kind of place that felt solid and trustworthy. I had only been there a few times with Henry, but the secretary remembered me right away. "Mrs. Henderson," she said warmly, standing to greet me. "Mr. Thompson is waiting for you. Please accept our deepest sympathy for your loss." Mr. Thompson was in his 70s with white hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He had been Henry's friend as well as his lawyer, and they often talked about fishing and baseball during their meetings. He stood when I entered, coming around his big wooden desk to give me a gentle hug. "Margaret," he said softly, gesturing for me to sit in the comfortable chair across from his desk. I was heartbroken to hear about Henry. He was truly one of the finest men I've ever known. He was, I agreed, my voice catching with emotion. And it seems he was right about preparing for trouble with Linda. I explained everything that had happened at Tommy's birthday party, showing him the fake will Linda had waved around like a weapon. Mr. Thompson examined it carefully through his reading glasses, his expression growing more serious with each line he read. "This is a very poor forgery," he said finally, setting it down on his desk. "The legal language is completely wrong, and the signature wouldn't fool anyone who knew Henry's real handwriting. But the fact that she created this document at all is extremely troubling." I showed him all the documents from our safety deposit box. The medical records proving Henry couldn't have fathered any children, the legitimate will, and Henry's journal documenting Linda's strange behavior over the years. "Henry was incredibly thorough," Mr. Thompson said, reviewing everything carefully. "These medical records alone completely disprove Linda's claim about Tommy's parentage. The surgery was performed 3 years before the child was born. It would be medically impossible for Henry to be the father. What should I do?" I asked, feeling overwhelmed. "I don't want to destroy Linda publicly, but I can't let her steal half of our home based on lies." Mr. Thompson leaned back in his leather chair, thinking carefully. "First, we need more information about Linda's current situation. I recommend hiring a private investigator to learn why she's doing this. People don't usually attempt fraud without being desperate about something." He recommended Patricia Kane, a former police officer who now worked as a private investigator, often helping with cases for the law firm. I agreed immediately, and Mr. Thompson called Patricia right from his office, explaining the basic situation without going into too much detail. Patricia arrived within an hour, a professional-looking woman with short gray hair and a no-nonsense attitude. She took careful notes as I explained Linda's lies and the fake will, asking detailed questions about my sister's job history, relationships, and financial situation. I realized I knew very little about Linda's current circumstances, despite being family. We had grown apart over the past few years, especially after Tommy's birth. My attempts to help with babysitting and family visits were often met with excuses or last-minute cancellations. "I'll need about a week to gather information," Patricia said when I had finished telling her everything I knew. "My first focus will be on her finances and her relationship with Tommy's real father. Can you tell me anything else about this Jake person?" I shared what little I remembered about Jake the mechanic, how Linda had met him at a bar and their stormy relationship. I mentioned that Jake hadn't been at Tommy's birthday party, which seemed odd for the child's father. "That's definitely worth investigating," Patricia said, making another note in her small notebook. "I'll be in touch soon with what I find." 1 week later, Patricia called asking to meet at Mr. Thompson's office again. When I arrived, both Patricia and Mr. Thompson were sitting at the conference table with folders and papers spread out between them. "Mrs. Henderson," Patricia began once I was seated, "I've discovered some very concerning information about your sister's situation." According to Patricia's investigation, Linda was in serious financial trouble. She owed over $90,000 spread across multiple credit cards, medical bills for Tommy's emergency surgery last year, and various personal loans. Her credit was terrible, and she had been turned down for consolidation loans at 3 different banks in the past 2 months. "She's also facing eviction," Patricia continued, sliding a document across the table to me. "This is a copy of the legal notice her landlord filed. She has until next Friday to pay 5 months of back rent or be forced to move out." As for Jake, he had apparently left Linda and Tommy right after the baby's first few months, moving to Florida with a woman he met online. He was supposed to pay child support but rarely sent money, maybe $150 once or twice since he left. Patricia had also found something else troubling. "I discovered these text messages," she said, producing printed copies. "These are conversations between Linda and her friend Carol from the party. They show she's been planning this scheme for weeks." The messages were shocking to read. "Henry's death might be the answer to my prayers," one message read. "That house is worth at least $800,000 now. If I can convince everyone Tommy is Henry's son, I'll get half of everything. The fake will looks perfect. My friend Dave, who does graphic design, helped me make it using Henry's signature from an old Christmas card. Margaret has always had everything handed to her. It's time for me to get what I deserve. She had 38 years with a wonderful husband. The least she can do is share the wealth now that he's gone." Reading Linda's cold, calculating words made me feel sick to my stomach. This wasn't just desperation or poor judgment. She had planned this cruel deception for weeks, deciding to use my grief and Henry's death for her own financial gain. "There's more," Patricia said gently, seeing how upset I was. "I also looked into Jake Martin's background. He has arrest records for assault and battery from 2 previous relationships, and there's currently a warrant out for unpaid child support for another child in Georgia. He's not someone you'd want around any child, let alone little Tommy." I sat there in stunned silence, trying to process everything I had learned. My sister wasn't just lying about Henry and Tommy. She was willing to destroy my husband's reputation and our marriage's memory to solve her money problems. And her choice in men had potentially put innocent Tommy in danger with an abusive father. "What are my options now?" I asked, looking between Patricia and Mr. Thompson. "I can't just let this situation continue, but I don't want to hurt Tommy. He's still my nephew and I love him." Mr. Thompson removed his glasses and rubbed his tired eyes. "You have several choices, Margaret. We could file criminal charges against Linda for fraud, forgery, and attempted theft. Given the amount of money involved, she could face serious jail time if convicted. Or," he continued, noticing my distressed expression, "we could handle this privately. Confront her with all our evidence, demand she retract her lies, and possibly work out some kind of arrangement that helps Tommy while holding Linda accountable for her actions." I left that meeting with a heavy heart and a briefcase full of evidence. That evening, I called Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the counselor I had been seeing since Henry's death, and scheduled an emergency appointment. In her peaceful office filled with plants and soft lighting, I poured out the entire horrible situation. "I'm so angry I can barely think straight," I admitted to Dr. Mitchell. "But Tommy is just an innocent baby caught in the middle of his mother's lies. And despite everything, Linda is still my sister." Dr. Mitchell listened patiently, occasionally asking questions about my relationship with Linda throughout our lives. It sounds like this pattern of jealousy and manipulation has existed since you were children, she observed thoughtfully. What Linda is doing now is an escalation, but not completely out of character based on what you've told me. What would you do in my situation? I asked desperately. I can't just let her get away with this, but I don't want to destroy our family completely. I can't make that decision for you, she replied kindly. But I will say that showing compassion doesn't mean allowing yourself to become a victim. You can be loving and kind while still setting firm boundaries and demanding consequences for harmful behavior. After much prayer and reflection over the next few days, I decided on my course of action. I would confront Linda privately with all the evidence Patricia and Mr. Thompson had gathered, giving her a choice: face possible criminal charges for her fraud, or accept a compromise that would help Tommy while requiring Linda to take responsibility for her lies and actions. With renewed determination, I called Linda the next morning. "We need to talk about Tommy and the will," I said when she answered the phone. "Can you come to my house tomorrow evening? Just you, not Tommy." "I knew you'd see reason eventually," she replied, sounding smugly confident. "I'll be there at 7 o'clock sharp." I spent the day preparing for Linda's visit, organizing all the documents in order and setting up a small recording device on Mr. Thompson's recommendation. "Kansas is a one-party consent state," he had explained. "So you can legally record conversations in your own home without the other person's permission. But it might be better to ask her consent anyway, to avoid any later disputes." At exactly 7 o'clock, my doorbell rang. I took a deep breath to steady my nerves before opening the door. Linda stood on my front porch looking polished and confident in an expensive-looking outfit I'd never seen before. Her hair was freshly styled and she carried herself like she had already won our battle. "Come in," I said, leading her to the living room where I had prepared 2 chairs facing each other. A small table between us held the recording device, glasses of water, and a folder containing all of Patricia's findings. "I hope you don't mind if I record our conversation," I said politely. "Given the legal nature of what we're discussing, it seems wise to have an accurate record." Linda hesitated for just a moment, then shrugged. "Sure, whatever makes you comfortable, though I think this should be pretty straightforward. The will speaks for itself." I turned on the recorder, stated the date and time, and confirmed Linda's agreement to be recorded. Then I sat back and studied my sister's face carefully. "Before we discuss Tommy's supposed parentage, I'd like to understand exactly what you're claiming happened between you and Henry." Linda launched into a detailed story that sounded rehearsed and practiced. According to her version, she and Henry had begun a secret affair 3 years ago during a time when our marriage was supposedly struggling, which it absolutely was not. She claimed they met regularly at a motel outside of town, and that Henry had confessed his unhappiness with our childless marriage. She said Tommy was conceived during one of these secret meetings. "Henry always planned to tell you the truth," she said with fake tears in her eyes. "But then Tommy was born with that heart problem, and Henry didn't want to add more stress to the situation. He promised he would provide for his son financially, though." I listened without interrupting, taking note of all the inconsistencies in her timeline and the details that contradicted everything I knew about Henry's actual schedule during that period. When she finished her performance, I began asking specific questions. "Which motel did you meet at?" I asked calmly. "The Sunset Inn on Highway 9, she replied quickly, seeming prepared for that question. "And what room did you usually get?" He paused slightly. "Different ones each time. I don't remember specific numbers." "What day of the week did you typically meet?" "Wednesdays, when Henry said he had school board meetings." I continued with increasingly detailed questions. "What did Henry usually wear to these meetings? What kind of car did he drive there? What did you talk about besides your supposed relationship problems?" Details that only someone who had actually spent intimate time with Henry would know. Linda grew more and more flustered with each question, her answers becoming vague or contradictory. She clearly hadn't expected this level of scrutiny. "Why does any of this matter?" she finally snapped, her confident mask slipping. "The important thing is that Tommy is Henry's son, and the will proves Henry wanted to provide for him. Actually, I said calmly, opening my folder, both of those claims are completely false. I placed Henry's medical records on the table between us. 3 years before Tommy was conceived, Henry had surgery for prostate cancer. The procedure left him unable to father children. It's medically impossible for him to be Tommy's father. Linda's face went pale as she picked up the medical documents with trembling hands. These could be fake, she said weakly, but her voice had lost all its earlier confidence. They're not fake, I replied firmly. And Dr. Martinez is prepared to testify about their authenticity if necessary. But that's just the beginning. Next, I produced Henry's real will, properly notarized and filed with the courthouse. This is Henry's actual will, prepared by Mr. Thompson and witnessed by 2 other attorneys. As you can see, it leaves everything to me with no mention of Tommy or anyone else. Linda's composure was crumbling before my eyes, but she tried one more desperate lie. Henry must have written a newer will after that one, she insisted. The one I showed you is more recent. The will you showed me, I said evenly, is a forgery. Very poor one. Mr. Thompson has already identified multiple legal errors in the language, and the signature is obviously fake to anyone who knew Henry's real handwriting. Creating a fraudulent will is a serious crime in Kansas, punishable by up to 10 years in prison. I continued methodically, presenting each piece of evidence Patricia had gathered. The text messages between Linda and Carol discussing their scheme to steal half my house. Patricia's investigation showing Linda's financial troubles, including the eviction notice and overwhelming debt. Jake's criminal background and abandonment of his responsibilities as Tommy's father. We know everything, Linda, I said as she sat in shocked silence. The question now is what happens next. For a long moment she didn't speak. Then, to my surprise, she began to cry. Not the dramatic tears I'd seen her use to manipulate people before, but deep, broken sobs. I didn't know what else to do, she finally gasped between tears. Tommy and I are going to be homeless next week. Jake left us with nothing but bills and threats from bill collectors. I thought if I could just get some money from your house. So you decided to destroy Henry's reputation? Asked, my voice growing harder. To tell everyone he cheated on me. To forge legal documents and lie about Tommy's parentage. I was desperate, she shouted, her sadness turning to anger. You have everything. This big house, financial security, everyone's respect and sympathy. What do I have? A sick baby, $90,000 in debt, and an eviction notice. You try making good decisions when you're drowning like that. Her outburst hung in the air between us. Despite everything she had done, the raw desperation in her voice touched something deep inside me. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps understanding. Tommy is Jake's son, isn't he? Asked more gently. She nodded through her tears. Yes, Henry never touched me that way. I tried flirting with him once years ago, but he shut me down immediately. He was completely devoted to you, which made me even more jealous. And the will? Yes. My friend Dave helped me create it using his computer skills. He thought it would be easy to copy Henry's signature from old Christmas cards you'd sent. I was going to use it to pressure you into giving me money voluntarily. I never expected you to investigate so thoroughly. I turned off the recording device and sat back, considering my options carefully. Linda watched me nervously, clearly expecting the worst possible outcome. I could file criminal charges against you, I said finally. What you did was illegal fraud, not to mention cruel and heartless. You tried to profit from my grief. She nodded miserably. I know it was wrong. I'm a terrible person and an even worse sister. But that would hurt Tommy, I continued. And despite everything you've done, he's still my nephew and I love him. I leaned forward, making sure she was looking directly into my eyes. So here's what's going to happen instead. You're going to tell everyone the complete truth. That you lied about Henry having an affair, that Tommy is Jake's son, and that you forged the will to try to steal half my house. You'll apologize publicly to me and to Henry's memory. And then what? She asked, her voice small and defeated. Tommy and I will still be homeless. I'm not finished, I said. In exchange for your full confession and a legal agreement that you'll never attempt anything like this again, I'll help you and Tommy get back on your feet. Not by giving you half my house, but by paying off your debts and helping you find stable housing and employment. Her eyes widened in shock. Why would you do that after what I tried to do to you? Not for you, I said honestly. For Tommy, and because Henry would want me to help his nephew, even if that nephew's mother tried to destroy his reputation. But there will be strict conditions. I outlined my requirements. Linda would enter counseling for her emotional problems and financial counseling to learn money management. She would maintain steady employment and allow me regular visits with Tommy to ensure he was being properly cared for. If she violated any of these conditions, all support would stop immediately. Linda was quiet for several minutes, processing everything I had said. I don't deserve your help or your kindness, she finally whispered. No, I agreed. You don't. But Tommy deserves a stable home and proper care. And I deserve to have Henry's memory remain untarnished by your lies. This solution gives us both what we actually need. After working out more details, Linda agreed to all my terms. We would meet with Mr. Thompson the following day to put everything in writing legally, and she would make her public confession at a family dinner that weekend. As I walked her to the door, she paused with her hand on the doorknob. I really am sorry, Margaret. I've been jealous of you my entire life. Everything always seemed so perfect in your world. Nothing about my life has been perfect, I replied firmly. Henry and I struggled with infertility for years. He battled cancer. We faced challenges you never bothered to notice because you were too busy resenting what you imagined we had. Maybe it's time you started looking at reality instead of your jealous fantasies. The family dinner I organized for the following Saturday was tense from the moment everyone arrived. My parents came early, bringing their famous pot roast as an attempt to make things normal. We don't understand what this meeting is about, my mother said as she arranged flowers on my dining room table. Linda has been calling us crying, saying you're forcing her to come to some kind of confrontation. Just wait until everyone is here, I replied, pouring coffee. This needs to be addressed once and for all, with everyone present to hear the truth. By 6:30 we were all seated around Henry's favorite table. My parents, Linda without Tommy who was staying with a babysitter, and me. Mr. Thompson had advised recording this conversation as well, so a small device sat openly in the center of the table. Thank you all for coming, I began after explaining why we were recording. I've asked Linda to share some very important information with the family. Linda. My sister looked pale and nervous, nothing like the confident woman who had made her dramatic announcement at Tommy's party. She stared at her plate as she spoke in a voice barely louder than a whisper. I lied about Tommy being Henry's son, she said. Henry and I never had any kind of affair or romantic relationship. Tommy is Jake's child, and I created a fake will to try to steal half of Margaret's house. My parents stared at her in complete shock and horror. But why would you do such a terrible thing? My father demanded, his voice shaking with emotion. Do you have any idea what that announcement did to your sister? What it did to Henry's reputation and memory? Linda explained her desperate financial situation in more detail. The crushing debt, Jake's abandonment, the eviction notice, and her panic about becoming homeless with a sick child. As she talked, I watched my mother's expression change from shock to sympathy, just as I had expected. Oh, sweetie, my mother said when Linda finished. Why didn't you just come to us for help? We could have worked something out. You didn't need to make up such horrible lies about Henry. Could you have given me $400,000? Linda asked bluntly. Because that's what I would have gotten if my plan had worked. Half the value of Margaret's house. Of course we couldn't give you that kind of money, my father replied. But we could have helped with rent and bills, at least temporarily. Instead, you chose to commit fraud against your own sister while she was still grieving. I know it was wrong, Linda admitted. Margaret has already made that very clear. She has enough evidence to send me to prison if she wants to. My mother turned to me with alarm. You wouldn't actually press charges against your own sister, would you, Margaret? I felt a familiar flash of irritation at her immediate defense of Linda even now. I could, I said firmly. What she did wasn't just morally wrong, it was criminal fraud and forgery. But she's family, and Tommy needs his mother. I am family too, I added, my voice rising. Your daughter too, the one who just lost her husband and then had to defend his reputation against false accusations. Where was your concern for me when Linda was trying to destroy my marriage's memory? My father shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Of course we care about you, Margaret. But Linda has always needed more help and guidance than you have. And whose fault is that? Ask pointedly. You've been rescuing her from consequences her entire adult life. Maybe if you'd let her face reality occasionally, she wouldn't have escalated to criminal behavior. My mother looked stricken. That seems hardly fair, Margaret. We've always tried to treat you girls equally. Surprisingly, Linda shook her head firmly. No, Mom, you haven't. Margaret is absolutely right. You always made excuses for my mistakes and found ways to fix my problems. It didn't help me grow up. It just taught me that I could do whatever I wanted without facing consequences. My parents looked shocked at this admission from Linda herself. For perhaps the first time in her life, she was taking full responsibility instead of blaming others or making excuses. So what happens now? My father asked, looking worried. Is Linda going to jail? No, I answered. I've decided not to press criminal charges, but only under very specific conditions. I explained the agreement Linda and I had reached with Mr. Thompson's help. The debt payment, housing assistance, counseling requirements, and employment conditions. That's incredibly generous, my father said, looking relieved. More generous than Linda deserves after what she did. It's more than I deserve, Linda agreed quietly. Margaret is being kinder to me than I've ever been to her. Well, my mother said, brightening up. This is all working out wonderfully then. Linda has apologized, Margaret is helping with Tommy, and we can put this whole ugly business behind us like it never happened. It's not that simple, Mom, I said firmly. Serious damage has been done here. Trust has been broken. Healing will take time if it ever happens completely. And there need to be permanent changes in how this family operates. What kind of changes? She asked, looking worried about losing her fantasy of perfect family unity. For one thing, you both need to stop enabling Linda's bad choices. No more bailouts, no more excuses, no more rescuing her from the consequences of her decisions. She needs to learn to stand on her own feet with appropriate support that doesn't create dependency. My father nodded slowly. That seems reasonable and probably overdue. And you need to understand that my relationship with Linda will be different now, I continued. I'll be involved in Tommy's life because I love him and want what's best for him. But Linda and I will not be close sisters the way we once were, at least not for a very long time. My mother looked distressed. But we're family. Families stick together through everything, especially during difficult times like these. Being family doesn't mean tolerating abuse and fraud, Mom, I said gently but firmly. What Linda did was abusive. She tried to use my grief and Henry's death to manipulate and steal from me when I was most vulnerable. That has consequences, even within a family. The rest of dinner was quiet and subdued, with my parents struggling to process this new reality. When they prepared to leave, my father hugged me tightly and whispered, I'm proud of how you've handled this, Margaret. Henry would be proud too. My mother hugged me as well, but her eyes were sad, already mourning the imaginary perfect family relationships she had always pretended we had. Linda was the last to leave. At the front door, she hesitated before turning to face me one final time. I really am sorry, Margaret. Not just for the will and the lies, but for everything over the years. For the constant competition and jealousy. For not being the sister you deserve to have. I know you are, I replied. And I hope the counseling helps you understand why you made these destructive choices. Tommy deserves a mother who is emotionally healthy and honest. Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive me? She asked quietly. I considered her question carefully before answering. I don't know, I said truthfully. But I'm willing to see where this new path leads us. For Tommy's sake, and maybe someday for ours too. The drive home was silent for my parents, each lost in their own thoughts about how dramatically our family had changed. I knew with certainty that we would never be the same again. But perhaps in time we could become something healthier. A family built on honesty and reality instead of comfortable illusions and enabling patterns. 1 year after Henry's death, I stood in our back garden watching the spring flowers bloom. The tulips Henry had planted the previous fall were magnificent, bright red and yellow against the fresh green grass. I felt that familiar bittersweet ache seeing them, knowing he had planted them with hopes of enjoying their beauty with me. So much had changed in that long, difficult year. The trust fund for Tommy was established and helping with his ongoing medical needs. His heart condition was improving with treatment, and he was developing into a happy, bright toddler. Linda had surprised everyone by genuinely embracing all the conditions of our agreement. 8 months of counseling had helped her recognize destructive patterns from childhood. She had found steady work as a receptionist at a medical clinic, providing stability and good benefits for both her and Tommy. Our relationship remained careful but civil. I visited Tommy regularly, taking him to the zoo and children's museums. Linda and I didn't pretend to be close, but we had found a way to coexist peacefully for Tommy's benefit. My parents had struggled initially with the new boundaries I had established, especially my mother who missed her fantasy of perfect sister relationships. But over time, they too had adjusted, learning to support Linda without enabling her destructive patterns. As for me, the grief counseling group I had joined became a lifeline. 10 strangers brought together by loss had become dear friends, understanding each other in ways that even loving family couldn't. We met weekly, sharing our journeys through grief and celebrating small victories along the way. 4 months after confronting Linda, I had established the Henry Henderson Memorial Scholarship for students pursuing education careers. It gave me purpose to see Henry's legacy continuing in the lives of young teachers who shared his passion for helping children learn and grow. Friends had rallied around me in beautiful ways. Henry's teaching colleagues checked on me regularly, including me in social gatherings so I wouldn't become isolated in my grief. My neighbor Mrs. Peterson visited daily with homemade soup and gentle companionship, never expecting conversation but always ready to listen if I needed to talk. Standing in Henry's beloved garden that spring morning, I reflected on everything he had taught me, both during our life together and even after he was gone. His careful preparation had protected me when I was most vulnerable. His documented concerns about Linda had validated my experiences when others tried to dismiss them. His love continued to guide and shield me even from heaven. I had learned that family relationships require honest boundaries to stay healthy, and that sometimes protecting yourself means disappointing people you love. Most importantly, I discovered strength I never knew I possessed, finding ways to honor Henry's memory while building a new life filled with purpose and hope.